So I've been riding in the city for about 6 months or so now, um, and I've definitely picked up a lot in terms of what to do, what not to do on the roads, how aggressive to be, how not aggressive in whatever situations, and it's definitely different than riding in kind of suburban environments. Very, very different, especially here in New York City. This is probably, I don't know what it's like out overseas, but again, I hear some horror stories. But New York City is probably one of the more extreme examples of riding in the city. If you could ride out here, you'll be more or less fine anywhere else. Now, with that said, there's definitely things to consider in the city, in New York City, that may not be a consideration for other cities like, whatever, Atlanta, Denver, et cetera, et cetera. So, in no particular order, one of the main things that I have to pay attention to, one of the main things in the city is road conditions, right? So like the city has all kinds of potholes, all kinds of sewer grates, metal working grates like right by kind of, it's riddled in kind of midtown east. But really they're all over the city, especially in the rain. They get super, super slippery. You've seen me kind of mention it in other videos. But there's all kinds of shit on the roads that you have to keep in mind. Pay attention to construction, pay attention to all the sidewalk seating, pay attention to where the roads are painted. Those are some pretty slippery surfaces. So road conditions in New York City are pretty treacherous, to say the least. These are not smooth roads. If you're coming into the city looking for it, look at these roads. There's tar snakes, there's lines, there's sewer grates, there's repairs, damage, all kinds of shit. As I kind of come to this traffic light here, I want to talk about traffic light etiquette real quick. I definitely filter to the front, just mainly because, for the most part, people pay attention when driving in the city, whether it's tourists. Well, tourists are kind of a different breed, but especially in New York City, or local drivers. In general, Ubers and taxis don't really want an accident on the record, and so they're pretty good about kind of avoiding you and making way. I don't necessarily worry about them too much, but I will always, when I have the opportunity, split to the front of the traffic light. And generally, like, if you're watching these videos and you're in a suburban area, I drive like an asshole. Quick word on emergency vehicles. The etiquette here is different in every city. People just do not give a shit in New York City. And so, I can't really tell you what to do, what not to do when emergency vehicles are present. It really kind of depends on where they are. Like what you just saw here, not much for you to do, just pay attention to it, see where he goes. If he's directly behind you and you're at the front of a traffic light, cars behind you will move forward. And so there have definitely been situations where I'd have to blow the light to avoid from getting hit from behind. 100% there are situations like that, and it's super dangerous, right? Because you're depending on the cars to the left and to the right in front of you that have a green signal to be able to understand what's happening. You're essentially running the red. So definitely keep that in mind. If you're at a red light and there's emergency vehicles behind you, be prepared to blow the light. And cars will do the same too. This isn't just like a bike thing. In general, going into any city, just if you're not prepared to be at least a little bit more aggressive riding in the city, you're just not going to have a great time. You're going to get, for lack of a better phrase, you're going to get run over. You've got to be prepared to get more aggressive. You've got to go in between. You've got to essentially, what you would consider drive like an asshole, do that in the city, but have a good time doing it. Again, every city kind of has its own unique spins on laws. And so, New York City, these laws are far more flexible and bendy than other cities I've been to. One thing that I learned pretty early on, this 1200S was not my first bike. My first bike was a Scrambler 1100 Sport Pro, which was an air-cooled bike. Now, I had bought the bike in February, so it was pretty cold out. Didn't bother me. But as it started to get warmer, right around in April, I kind of realized, like, shit, I'm sitting here in mostly traffic, and there's no real active way to cool the bike. And I figured, okay, if my thighs are burning now, who the hell knows what it's going to be like in the summer. And so I walked into a Ducati dealership with the Scrambler and walked out with this monster, which is a water-cooled bike, liquid-cooled. Definitely something you want to keep in mind if you're going to be riding most of the time in the city. Motorcycle dealerships will sell you whatever it is you want to buy, right? They're not going to talk you out of anything. They're not going to talk you into anything. Their path of least resistance is to sell you what you want to buy. So just keep that in mind. If 50 to 90+% of your riding is going to be in the city, I'd probably stay away from an air-cooled bike unless you're doing like really short bursts and you're not riding in 90-degree plus heat. For me, I ride all year round, right? So I had to make the hard choice of I really can only use a liquid-cooled bike, and even this bike gets pretty hot. So again, just something to keep in mind when you're kind of getting ready in the morning and going out for that ride. So I'm on the FDR now, just past that cop, and generally the FDR is fucking beautiful. If you're in the city, especially in New York City for the first time, and you're on the West Side Highway or FDR, you're going to want to look at at the river. You're going to want to kind of take in the sights. My recommendation for your first time is don't. I'm riding right now in definitely off-peak time, but usually the FDR and the West Side Highway are packed. And people are going to stop short, people are going to cut in, especially the FDR, which is where I am now. It's just fucking deadly. Like, you're going out there, you're taking your life into your own hand, just hang on for your life. The same principles from street riding in a big city apply to city highway riding. Obviously the dynamics are a little bit different, but you're going a lot faster. People will cut into your lane. There's a lot of lane switching. As you saw here, they generally don't like to stay in their own lanes. Those metal grates are here too, and roads can be very, very damaged on city highways as well. I know for sure in Philly they are also. Right outside of Atlanta, same bullshit. Denver, same thing. So city highway riding is like, that's what you graduate to after you really kind of learn city riding in general. Again, the FDR, like, again, if you find yourself in New York City and you need to take the FDR somewhere, don't. Just don't do it. Take 3rd Ave all the way up, take 1st all the way up, whatever it is, just avoid the FDR like the plague. Get on the FDR or on the West Side Highway once you have a good kind of sense on what the dynamics are, or whatever city you're in, get on the highway once you get a sense of what the dynamics are. Just be careful. And you can see, like, and the FDR is essentially where like all the Infiniti and BMW boys wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to go race my car. This is where they go, on the FDR. It's a bitch. So overall, another question I get is, when do you use your horn? I mean, it's a good question. If I'm splitting in the city and there's taxis all around, I'll very rarely use my horn, just because what I'm worried about isn't the taxi driver getting into my lane, it's the passenger opening the door, and the passenger opening the door will just not pay attention to a horn. So generally what I'll do is, if I feel like it's imminent, like they're about to open their door, sure, I'll honk the horn and I'll blip my engine. But generally, as I'm splitting, and there's no kind of immediate threat, I'll just blip my engine every now and then. I'll blip it when I see like an Uber coming up or a Lyft. And you kind of get to know these, you kind of get to recognize them in the city. Or I'll blip the throttle on the text. I will use the horn on intersections. Like if I'm approaching an intersection and I see people just not giving a shit and crossing on their red, my green, I will beep the horn as I approach an intersection, and 10 out of 10 so far, it's worked very well. People jump up, they look, and they run. Works very, very well. Also, be scary. Right, whatever, works for me. I mean, you may not agree with it, but I will get on the throttle, I'll get on the throttle. And as I'm beeping the horn and getting on the throttle, people just pay attention. Just but be ready to brake, right? Be ready to slam on the brakes. I've only really had that happen once or twice, but generally people get out of the way. People get scared and they run. But keep in mind that works really well in the touristy sections because they're just not paying attention and they need that like horn. But in the local section, it may not work so well. Right, because they're just so used to auditory overload. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes you'll just have to wait for them to cross. Even though their light is red, whatever it is, what it is, go around them. But in general, I guess to sum up, if you're going to be doing sustained city riding in a specific city, start off slow. Be prepared to get aggressive, use speed to your advantage, and work your way up. That's it.